I don't know if anyone listening remembers, but I started this channel. I think one of the first videos I did was talking about Star Wars. It's something that I've always loved since I was a kid, especially the OT era and the EU. It's meant a lot to me, and its future means a lot to me as well. So I continue to see where it's headed and hope for the best. Unfortunately, I think we've all just been in the position where we hope for the best, but we just expect the worst. This rumor seems to cycle through a lot when it comes to Kathleen Kennedy's tenure as head of Lucasfilm. We've seen this before, but what we haven't seen is the fact that this was reported on by a Hollywood insider, someone who is within the Hollywood Reporter. He knows this information, and this is the same source that broke the news about Kathleen Kennedy's prior contract extension. That's why all of the trades were then picking up this story that Lucasfilm boss Kathleen Kennedy expected to retire this year. This year is when her contract will expire. So this is the news that has been floating around from within Hollywood, from within the people that are in the know. Other insiders as well. Jeff Snyder, I believe, is another one who heard this, I think, prior. In his blog, he said he talked about this months ago, that this is the plan moving forward. This is what they're looking at as far as her replacement, seeing what they can do with her retirement on the horizon when her contract expires this year. So that's why all of the trades were reporting on it. So it's definitely very different than before when you hear just scattered things and unsubstantiated claims. But this definitely seems to have more weight to it. And let's just see what this insider information was. A few days ago, this story broke. After more than a decade in a galaxy far, far away, Kathleen Kennedy is charting a course toward retirement. The Lucasfilm boss has told associates she plans to retire by the end of 2025. A source confirms to The Hollywood Reporter. Puck reported the news Monday night. Reps for Kennedy and Lucasfilm are not immediately available for comment, but we know that Kennedy makes a comment later. Kennedy joined Lucasfilm in 2012. She was co-chair alongside Star Wars creator George Lucas, and a few months later took the reins after Disney paid $4 billion for the company and Lucas exited. And this is a brief summation of her tenure. She relaunched the franchise with J.J. Abrams' Star Wars The Force Awakens, which grossed more than $2 billion and reinvigorated the property as a big screen brand. It's not crazy. That does make sense. That's what Kathleen Kennedy was handed, is this beloved franchise, huge fan base, and one of the biggest multimedia IPs in the world. This is something that's continued for decades. It's multi-generational, that they've accrued new fans. That number actually makes sense. That's where you started. You had $2 billion for your first movie, and it should have gone up from there, your success, because you had all of that fan base ready to support you, ready to give you their money. That's where you started from. Primo position. And then each subsequent film reduced in those box office numbers. And honestly, it should have been going up each time. Each movie should have been exceeding the previous box office gross, or at least equating it. I think they both made over $1 billion, but each production was riddled with chaos, especially Rise of Skywalker. They were doing rewrites and reshoots on the fly, and they didn't even know what they were doing with Rey's parentage, what her origin was. They couldn't decide. They were making decisions as they were shooting. Everyone hated it. And yeah, it just continued to decline after. The last film should have been making the most money. There was definitely a major hit and diminishing returns for each of the sequel films. As Lucasfilm boss, Kennedy held one of the most visible and scrutinized jobs in Hollywood, and it was not always smooth sailing. She fired Chris Lord and Phil Miller as directors of Solo, a Star Wars story, in the middle of production. The film went on to be the first Star Wars movie to lose money theatrically. She also sidelined Rogue One, a Star Wars story director Gareth Edwards, replacing it with Tony Gilroy, who was brought on to oversee reshoots. And I think those reshoots were pretty major. And I remember, just seeing those first trailers, and you could see how it was different as each trailer came out. The film just completely changed. It did gross $1 billion, but they spent a lot of money, more than they should, to make it because of all the cost of this production chaos. And I think they're still paying for it because they are now being sued by, I think he's a friend of Peter Cushing, the late actor who played Tarkin, for the unauthorized use of his image for that movie. So they are currently going through trial with that. So they're still spending money on that, and they barely eked out a profit. They did spend a lot, but because of where they shot it, they did get a rebate. So they got some money back, but I think it was just under $300 million to make that. And that's not even including marketing. Other projects were promised that never materialized, such as Rian Johnson's trilogy. Yeah, they announced that, I think, pretty soon after The Last Jedi. We're giving him a whole trilogy all to himself, okay? Haven't seen that. He's gone on to do the Knives Out trilogy, his own murder mystery thing with Daniel Craig. And another film overseen by Game of Thrones showrunners D.B. Benioff and David Weiss, another project that never materialized. Daisy Ridley's upcoming return to Star Wars has been languishing in development since being announced to fanfare almost 2 years ago. They announced that at Star Wars Celebration, and nothing has happened since. Not that anyone was ever excited about that, since this was a character that was the main focus of the prior sequel trilogy and definitely not a fan favorite. But regardless, they just lost their third screenwriter, and I think they just hired their fourth, who now has to write the new script. So I don't know if that's happening. But even as Star Wars struggled to return to the big screen, the franchise found new life on Disney Plus with The Mandalorian, launching in November 2019 along with the streaming service. It became a breakout hit, spawning multiple spin-offs, including the critically acclaimed Andor, which returns for a second season in April, as well as multiple shows that failed to hit the zeitgeist and sparked worries of diluting the Star Wars brand. Coming up, Lucasfilm has The Mandalorian and Grogu film from director Jon Favreau due out May 22nd, 2026, as the first big screen outing for the franchise since Rise of Skywalker. That was a movie that they didn't even announce at Star Wars Celebration, and it definitely feels like it was a repurposed Mando Season 4, and they probably just had all of this stuff already prepped and ready to go and had some storylines kind of worked out, and they probably just decided it's getting embarrassing how many films we've announced that have yet to materialize. Let's just move that to the big screen. Whether that will be a success, I honestly don't know. I think it's a horrible name for the film, and it is something that started on Disney Plus and now is jumping to the big screen. So we'll see. It's probably the smoothest production that they've had so far, though, because Jon Favreau has lots of experience with that. Talks about her storied career as producer, with her work with Steven Spielberg and her husband, Frank Marshall, and her prior resume as producer, which concluded with last year's Dial of Destiny. I will also add that is the film that was produced under her tenure at Lucasfilm, and it was the only one to flop. And I think it was the year of the flopbuster. And I think this film is what actually coined that term. An Indiana Jones movie flopped. That is just crazy to say. The news comes ahead of April's Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo, where the future of the Star Wars franchise is expected to be unveiled. I could definitely see them planning something special for Kathleen Kennedy at Star Wars Celebration, and maybe that will be how she caps off things. Let's celebrate all of her numerous failures. Count on one hand stuff that was able to eke out a profit. There has just been way more misses than hits. And let's not forget that Lucasfilm includes Indiana Jones and Willow. The Willow revival series they had to delete from the platform from Disney Plus for a tax write-off because it was doing that bad. Season 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian worked because she was not paying attention to it. And then when she realized, I guess, the commercial potential because of Grogu, there was so much merchandising opportunities there. And then once she turned her attention to it, she ruined it. You couldn't even launch something that was original. You had this new character, and I liked the fact that it didn't touch upon anything that was established prior. Like, do your own thing. Prove that you can tell a Star Wars story in George Lucas's universe. For the most part, they tried to do that, at least, and still honor the spirit of George Lucas. And George Lucas was on set, I think, for both of those seasons. They wanted to include him. And they completely botched that. And you could definitely feel Kathleen Kennedy's intrusion, that you couldn't just let them be, let them create. And you ruined your own character. You ruined The Mandalorian. And season 3 was just so horrible. They really need to be focusing on George Lucas's approach, what mattered to him, what themes meant the most to him that he really wanted to convey, and go from there. it did become this commercial juggernaut because people wanted to buy merch. They wanted to immerse themselves in other mediums and other forms of this IP. They bought the toys, they bought the video games, they bought the books and comics. It just expanded ever more into these other mediums. But George was the visionary the whole time. He was the visionary that kept everything together, that kept all the creatives in line with his vision and what mattered most to him, those themes that were important. And the ones that were involved wanted to honor his legacy, wanted to honor what he created. So everyone who was brought on board to write, to contribute to this ever-growing, expanded universe wanted to make sure that it honored George Lucas, it honored his characters, and that it didn't ruin anything. And yeah, the canon can be a little convoluted at times. There's like sub-canons and stuff for certain characters, and for the most part, it was very cohesive. But you needed to have someone, the visionary, who loved Star Wars, was knowledgeable and passionate, not just about the canon and mythology, but of George Lucas himself and what he was trying to convey in his themes. And Kathleen Kennedy has done nothing but betray that. That infamous video of George Lucas and Kathleen Kennedy sitting down, they're talking about his themes and what's important to Star Wars. And then Kathleen Kennedy starts to open her mouth and is just PR, used car salesman speak. She's saying what she thinks she needs to say to George and to the fans and the audiences to reassure us. And she didn't do any of the things that she promised. She said she would honor George Lucas, honor the spirit of Star Wars, his themes, his characters, protect those things, foster a good, expansive universe, something that expands upon what he built. And he said, I have the story treatments for the sequels ready for you. We have all of these books, comics, and all of these things. A treasure trove, he called it, of stories that I am gifting to you, to Kathleen Kennedy. And what was her first decision? Decanonize everything. We're going to wipe the slate clean. And we're going to do everything in our power to dismantle the spirit of Star Wars, dismantle his canon, and bastardize his characters. That's how Kathleen Kennedy speaks. For 13 years, we've heard her speak as head of Lucasfilm. She never gives straightforward answers. It's always a word salad after word salad. If she's asked about new projects, she'll just say, oh, we're looking at that. We're looking at that. She will never give a straight answer to anything. She'll just say what she thinks the interviewer or whoever wants to hear. She failed as a studio head in so many ways, creatively and commercially. And even the Hollywood Reporter didn't even list all of the failures, and it's a laundry list. And other articles have. So there's an article from Variety that did talk about who will run the franchise next. And it talked about the challenges that the next person will have because of the position that they're in. After all these failures, it's going to be very tough, if not impossible. But almost everyone agrees that there's basically no chance of salvaging the Star Wars IP until she's gone. So hopefully her retirement from this position will be the first step in an attempt to turn things around. But I'm curious to know how you feel about Kathleen Kennedy's tenure at Lucasfilm. Do you think there's any chance that the company can make a rebound after her reported retirement? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more sci-fi and fantasy news, theories, and lore. And if you're looking for ways to support the channel, you can leave a super thanks or join as a YouTube member for early access to new videos and other perks. You can also check out my Patreon page for exclusive content. Thank you all so much for your support. And as always, have a very nerdy day.